Hi, everybody. I have Dr. Rae Jean Proeschold-Bell, a psychologist and research professor of global health at Duke University. Rae Jean conducts research on the physical and mental health, including the positive mental health of clergy and others, and I love this, others in servant-hearted roles such as teaching and caregiving. Since its establishment in 2007, Rae Jean has been at the forefront of the Duke Clergy Health Initiative, which she now directs. Welcome, Rae Jean.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Well, we met at the Common Table conference, and you were a star because everybody was grabbing you. You was noticed that you were having breakfast with people, you were having corridor conversations, there were photos being taken. Is that something that happens to you a lot, Reggie?
There are not that many audiences that are completely devoted to clergy and clergy well-being. But yes, oh my goodness, if I can be with clergy and with the people who care about them, then because my team and I have been focused on clergy well-being for 19 years, then it might happen. But it's very rare. It's really nice when it does though, because I'm so passionate about caring for clergy. It's so great to share it.
You must have seen a lot happen in 19 years. Or I hope you've seen a lot happen in this space in 19 years. I haven't. I hope we haven't stayed stagnant. Have you seen a change yourself?
Oh my goodness. Well, so there's so much more that we know now than we did before. Interventions and programs have also progressed at least a little bit. Those are two ways. Things that we didn't know, like at the beginning, we were really, there had been studies done up through 1950. There was this great demographic study all around the world from like the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and clergy lived longer and had fewer um, reasons to die. But those reasons really hinged upon like fewer accidents, less suicide, also less sexually transmitted infections. And so for
Yeah.
these reasons, clergy lived a lot longer. But then, and so when I entered in 2007, the United Methodist clergy in North Carolina were saying they were less healthy, but all the data suggested that they should be pretty healthy. What changed in there is for society is that we've got safer. Like you're less likely to have an accident today than you were in the early 1900s. And at the same time, what's really harming people in the United States now, and I would imagine also in Australia, would be the non-communicable diseases, the chronic diseases that often in the United States come from obesity, the hypertension, diabetes, arthritis. These things are really harming people's health now.
Yeah. Yeah. And at some point, you really got an interest in the positive mental health aspects. How did you get to that point?
Yes. My goodness. So one of the exciting things that we got to do, like very early in those last 19 years. So, we listened closely to clergy in the first year, and then we did a survey of all the United Methodist clergy in North Carolina, 1,800 clergy. And then based on that, we designed a holistic health intervention and rigorously tested it. And clergy told us that they really cared about holistic health. They cared about mind, body, and spirit. So we had components for all of those. And we ended up, the intervention did a really good job in improving people's physical health. And so that was fantastic, given what I just said about there being worse physical health for United Methodist clergy. Clergy lost weight, and they also got diabetes and hypertension under control. I also had this goal of reducing depression symptoms.
Okay.
And we have found that depression symptoms are higher amongst United
Right.
Methodist clergy and some mainline Protestant clergy than they are with other groups of clergy. And again, not all clergy, which tells you can do this job without having elevated depression symptoms. But to get to how I got to positive mental health, this intervention that we did called Spirited Life did not change the depression symptoms on average for its participants compared to the control group. Um, I'm a psychologist, so I took that kind of personally. How is it that I can help physical health and not mental health? And also what we saw happening is that some clergy with elevated depression symptoms, they would get better, their symptoms would go down. But then a different pastor who had not had elevated depression symptoms would newly get them. So it was coming out to be about the same. And it really got me thinking, like, how do you drop the depression prevalence across an entire group? And you can't just treat people as they get it because that's what we were trying to do, and you just
Mm,
end up with the same rate at best. What you really need to do is prevent depression symptoms in the first place. So that took me on a journey of, like, how do you do that? And if you look, at least in the US systems, one way that happens is you go to your primary care doctor for a regular checkup. You get screened with a couple depression questions. If they flag as maybe there's an issue, then your doctor might recommend therapy or medication, and maybe they give you medication. Likely they start you at an appropriate dose, but it's going to be a low dose, and then you likely don't get checked back on in a few weeks. And then you're likely to conclude that the medication doesn't work for you. And medications do work for a lot of people, but they also don't work for everyone. Anyway, our system doesn't work very well in terms of, and that's all like a treatment
mm.
paradigm and not a prevention paradigm. Looking at the literature, there was this sociologist, Corey Keyes at Emory University, who had this article that said a national strategy for reducing depression. And I read it and I called him up, and he has joined our team. And and he had all these studies about positive mental health. And people who have higher positive mental health now are less likely to get a new case of depression in 1 to 5 or 10 years from now. And they're also less likely to get a new physical health diagnosis. So I got really excited because isn't that what we want? Like that's the holy grail, if you can do something that helps people, both their mental and their physical health. I also thought, I've done these studies, say, to reduce alcohol use amongst patients with hepatitis C. Like, that's actually really not so fun. Try telling people to drink less. I thought, okay, here we go. Now I can tell people that we want to lean into positive mental health. Like, maybe this can be really fun. Maybe this can be something that a message and activities that people would enjoy doing.
Nice. Can I take you back? What is the Spirited Life trial?
Yes. Okay. So the Spirited Life trial was from 2010 to 16. And in it, it was for each pastor who participated, it was 2 years worth of interventions. And we did three. And I was like, how do you keep someone engaged for 2 whole years? So what we did is we had three overnight retreats and workshops. And so at the beginning, at the 1 year point, and at the 24-month point. So that kind of hooked people in. And we also offered everyone an online healthy eating program. We offered them monthly health coaching, and then also to hook them in at the 1 year mark, they could have a $500 small grant to improve their mind, body, or spirit in a way that they felt. And from all of that, we wanted to reduce metabolic syndrome, which is obesity, a large waist circumference, hypertension, high cholesterol in terms of triglycerides, and your A1C in terms of a diabetes indicator. We were trying to reduce those. We wanted to reduce depression symptoms, and we wanted to reduce stress symptoms.
Right. So I can see that that's the early intervention from a physiological perspective definitely had impact on the medical and physiological outcomes for clergy. And you had thought that it would then also spread into the mental health side of things, which led you to say, okay, there's another ingredient. Perhaps it's positive mental health. What is positive mental health?
Right? Great. Yes. Yes. So we learned actually from our failure that we didn't affect depression. I think this is really important. Like, you can't expect everything to work the first time you design something. And so, yeah, so now we've been leaning into positive mental health, and positive mental health is really three things. It's having high levels of positive emotions on a regular basis. So this might be feeling happy, feeling satisfied with life, interested in life. That's one way that these things are measured, but you can imagine all kinds of other emotions of just like curiosity and satisfaction, savoring the moment and things like that. That's one. But you also need high levels of psychological functioning and social functioning. And so by psychological functioning, these are things like having warm and trusting relationships and feeling like you're growing as a person, having meaning in your life. And then for social functioning, these are things like feeling like you belong to a community and feeling like you're contributing to making this world a better place. And there's an item on this measure that used to baffle me and now is making more sense to me. And it says, I feel like society is becoming a better place. I used to think that's really hard to answer. And
Yeah.
like, what does this have to do with my
Yeah.
positive mental health? But right now in the United States, we have a lot of political polarization and people who share a lot in common still moving it to like the us them categories. And it doesn't feel like society is becoming a better place. I imagine to anyone, no matter where they are on the political spectrum right now. And that takes a toll on your positive mental health.
Well,
If I could
yeah.
add, I thought about this a lot. If I could add so these aspects of positive mental health. 12 years ago, I had breast cancer. Thanks be to God, I am all good right now. But it was a tough journey, had a scary kind or scary yeah, it was serious. And what learned for me is that that first kind of happiness and well-being, the positive emotions are
Mm,
going to be harder for anybody to invoke in that moment where there's a lot of fearful things going on. And I'm not saying that there won't be a moment, but
yeah.
as much as you might want to like laugh and joke as you see in the movies, I'm going to laugh my way all the way through this illness. Like that we're not really hardwired to do that because we are hardwired to focus on what could go wrong.
Mm,
At the same time, so my positive emotions plummeted, but
mm,
the other 2 aspects of my life stayed strong. So the psychological functioning in terms of having meaning in my life, meaning from my work, meaning from being a parent, and feeling like I had warm and trusting relationships, that was still strong and people really
mm,
showed up for me. Maybe it even got stronger. And then that social functioning of, like, belonging to groups and making a
yeah.
difference, that can still stay strong. And so I've been thinking a lot about what to recommend to those of us who know people going through cancer and care for them.
Mhm,
And I think you don't have to, like, lean into the light things. You
mm,
don't it doesn't have to be about the dessert that may or may not taste good or the movie tickets that you might not be able to go to if you're immunocompromised or things. It really can be telling people, "Hey, do you remember the time we did this?" Or "You really
mm.
touched my life in this way." You can savor the past and you can savor your relationship, and that will boost positive mental health.
That's so powerful. I think that's a whole episode right there. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad to hear that 12 years ago was hard, but you're in a different space today. Yeah.
And 12 years ago is when I started focusing on positive mental health around clergy. So it was
Oh,
an
how
interesting yeah, it came
so good.
together all at the same time. So I was learning it at a time when I needed it, and
Yeah.
then hopefully bringing it to clergy.
Yeah.
In fact, we have. Yeah, if I could tell you about one of
Yes.
our next trial. So I told you about the Spirited Life trial, and that was very long, like 2 years, lots of components. We wanted to try something that was it was a lighter lift. And so I hope your listeners will be interested because this will culminate in practices that they can do that doesn't require someone paying for them to go on 3 retreats and things like that.
Yes.
And so we decided to test 3 ways of stress management because the other thing that didn't work from the Spirited Life trial was reducing stress symptoms.
Mm.
Oh my gosh. What was I even thinking? I was such a novice thinking that I could affect the stress symptoms of clergy. Like what a variety of tasks ministry is, and it's very emotional and deep work. And trying to decrease stress symptoms is a really big deal. So we looked at mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is kind of the gold standard, and I can say more about what it is. And we also looked at the daily examine prayer practice.
Mm.
So, and I'll tell you more about that. And then we looked at something called stress proofing.
Mm.
And I'm going to really focus on mindfulness-based stress reduction and the daily examine because those are the ones that had good outcomes.
Please.
Yeah,
But
and so
first, what is stress proofing?
oh, yeah, so stress proofing focuses on stress inoculation, which is the idea that when you're not all that stressed in your life, you introduce some stress to yourself while you can handle it, and you prove to yourself you can handle it
Ah,
with the idea that you'll be better later.
right. So it's a little bit like you're able to restructure your perspective by introducing little incremental steps. All right.
Yes, it had some good outcomes, but not as many, and it was harder to do, and it was packaged as multiple also had some, like, lifestyle change, like, put away your phone an hour before bedtime and, try a week without drinking alcohol.
All right. Yes. So now let's hear about the two things that did work.
Yes, right? So mindfulness-based stress reduction is set of practices which can be like awareness of your breath, just like noticing your breath coming in and out, not trying to change it, just noticing it for 10 minutes at a time, maybe longer. It can be a body scan where you feel one by one, you take every part of your body. I can feel my toes. I can feel the arch of my foot, like slowly coming all the way up or back down again and taking a good 20, 45 minutes to do that. It can be mindful walking where you feel every little bit of your footstep. And there's also yoga. Again, there's multiples of these. And if any of your listeners take a mindfulness based stress reduction course, they would be exposed to all of these and then encouraged to pick the ones that they like best. I really like loving kindness meditation best, and
Mm.
we have that on our website. And in loving kindness meditation, you pick a refrain and you apply it first to yourself and then to other people. So you might first say to yourself, "May I be well, may I be happy, and may I be at peace." And then you might apply it to um, a neighbor, congregant, your whole church, your whole city,
Mhm.
and do it step by step. And by the time you're done with that, I always feel more peaceful.
Yeah. And so that's the mindfulness based stress reduction practices. And I can put some links in the podcast to those practices.
Yes, and anyone can do the online distance learning version from the Duke Integrative Medicine that
Great.
our clergy participants did, but it is pretty standardized around the world if you get a certified mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And that was 8 classes, 90 minutes each.
Okay.
And then, I had been at a couple conferences that always put together psychologists and philosophers.
Mm.
And I had said, I knew nothing about philosophy, so that was super interesting for me. And I'd said, we're finding in our data that when clergy face criticism, if they think about what is it that God's wanting them to do in this season? And does that criticism relate to that or not? And if they decide the criticism is not actually really relevant to the work that the pastor's doing with God right now, then they can just let it go.
Mm.
And we were finding clergy who were flourishing were telling us that that was how they were dealing with criticism. They were working in alignment with God. I was like, I don't know how to do an intervention for that though. I was like, I just threw up my hands. I don't think we could do it. And I met this psychologist from a Catholic university, and he said, I know exactly how you do that. It's called the daily examen. It's an Ignatian prayer practice. It's been around for 500 years. And um and his name is Tony Arends. You like I bet that will work. And so I said, "Oh," so I thought, "Well, I'd love to study that." So we in the Duke Clergy Health Initiative have done one of the only randomized controlled trials of a structured prayer practice, and certainly one of the only ones that was trying to say, could a prayer practice reduce stress symptoms? Wouldn't that be great? Like, we know the prayer practice is supposed to bring you closer to God, and wouldn't it be just fabulous if at the same time your mental health also got better? And so the daily examine, and you can find apps on it, books on it. You can go to our website and get the exact 5 steps that we used. But basically, you thank God for the day. So there's some gratitude. You walk through your last 24 hours and remember everything that happened, which is a little bit of present focus. So not quite as much as mindfulness-based stress reduction where you're thinking about like right now, how is my breathing right now? But it doesn't have you worried about the future, and it doesn't have you sad about the past. You're just in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself, like, where did I feel one of the greatest emotions in the last 24 hours? And it can be a pleasant emotion, like feeling content, or it can be an unpleasant emotion, like feeling really frustrated that you're criticized or angry. And then you pray through it, and you ask God for help with it, and you prayerfully work that through. And then you think about your very next step of what you might do and take away from that prayer, and then you thank God for the day.
Mm.
And so we wondered, and as a psychologist, I also thought, my goodness, that's so brilliant. There's a little bit of positive practices in there. There's a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy, but like with the source, with God
Yeah.
as the source.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would this work? So like, what we really want is clergy to be managing their stress well enough that they can attend to their congregants, they can show up and do good counseling, they can think of messages that are going to be meaningful in sermons, they can be connecting with communities and helping their communities or doing the social justice work. That's what we want for clergy. But instead, they're often really stressed out and running around doing too much, and also this feeling criticized or alone and isolated. These are both kind of common experiences for clergy. So
Yeah.
so the first thing is you'd have to do these practices for them to make a
Yes.
difference. I'll be honest, I did not think that clergy would do 45 minutes a day of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And so we texted them every day and we asked them how many minutes they had done yesterday. And on average, they did 28 minutes, but they don't.
That's impressive.
Yes, think of where your next 28 minutes is coming from. I was blown away. And they did for 6 months. Like 5 or 6 days a week. Yes. So that was so promising because that meant it could make a difference. And then with the daily examine, they likewise did it on about 80% of the days for 6 months, and it took them on average 12 minutes. And so it's a lighter lift. It's less time, and you don't have to take an 8-week class. You can learn it. I think I just taught it to everyone. Like, you can learn it quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then we wondered, okay, would it reduce stress symptoms? And it did for both of them. We also wondered, would it reduce distress? And for both of them, it reduced anxiety symptoms and depression symptoms. We also wondered, would it increase positive mental health? These
Mm.
3 things that I had just defined for our listeners here. And it did for both of them,
Mm.
especially so for the daily examine. And then we also wondered whether it would increase spiritual well-being.
Mm.
And it also did, for both of them. And so I would say I shouldn't actually say increase. I should say compared to the control group,
Mm.
the participants had better spiritual well-being scores and better positive mental health scores. They also had better depression, anxiety, and stress symptom scores. But there was a difference between the two of them, which leads us to really recommend mindfulness-based stress reduction if people will do it. You'll take those classes if you'll do half an hour a day. Please do it because it will help you sooner.
Mm.
We saw great outcomes at 3 months, whereas the daily exam took 6 months. The other thing is I have to just say I love the North Carolina United Methodist clergy that I've gotten to work with all these years. During the COVID shutdown, they let our team mail them little ECG devices. and they wore them for 48 hours at a time. You had to go online and learn how to hook it up and put electrodes on themselves and gel and all the rest, and then wore them for 48 hours before they started their practice. And then 3 months later, the mindfulness based
Mm,
stress participants saw a 15% improvement in their heart rate variability. Heart rate variability indicates your heart's ability to go back to normal following a stressor. Can it respond to that stressor? And it is linked with lower cardiac events and fewer
mm,
strokes, which
mm,
those are the ways stress can like flat out kill you. You
mm.
can have a stroke, you can have a heart attack. And so the fact that mindfulness based stress reduction saw a 15% better scores than the control group is just shocking. The daily examine, the findings, it was a 6% better than the control group, and it wasn't statistically significant at 3 months. And
Yeah,
had we
yeah.
been able to collect that data at 6 months, maybe it would have been, but we only collected it at 3 months because it's so hard to collect and clean all that data.
And they were in either or groups, weren't they?
We let them choose. It was what we called a preference-based, partially randomized trial.
Yeah.
So if the pastor told us that they didn't care whether they did mindfulness-based stress reduction, the daily examine, or stress proofing, we randomly assigned them. And then we randomly assigned to whether they got the intervention right away or went into the waitlist control group. If they had a preference, if somebody told me there's no way I'm doing mindfulness, then I wasn't going to give them mindfulness because we know humans. Like, you're
Yeah.
not gonna do something half an hour a day for 6 months
Yeah.
if you're telling me at the front end that this is not for
Yeah.
you. And so in that case, we went ahead and gave them their first choice, but we still randomly assigned them to getting it right away or waiting.
Regina, I have a hypothesis that I wonder about the incremental effects. Because on the Australian side of what we've looked at, not myself, but others, there's this thinking that rumination and reflection, two different mental processes to make sense, and that for clergy who are really experienced in practice at reflecting and not ruminating, they also experience benefits to their well-being. And I think mindfulness is provides the brain with so much calm. Like it just resets the whole neural system to give you the ingredients to then be more present minded and more still and more focused and deep in the other things that you might do. So whether you were doing the daily examine prayer or whether you were reflecting on scripture or whether you were reflecting on your day, I wonder whether it becomes an incremental effect, like a building block. You know, the more practice you get at being present, then the more efficacious, if you like, you get at then using that stillness into the other portions of your practice, like reflection. What do you think about that hypothesis?
Oh my goodness. I think that has been shown for mindfulness. Like those mindfulness practices, they build over time and it can get better and do bring it to other areas of your life.
Mm,
The thing about stressors in your life is like they come at you all the time. Like
yeah,
you might
yeah,
start your day off without any yet, or maybe you are worried about something from the day before, but then they build across the day. And so being able to like boost yourself with like that real peace and calm and train your brain, like the
yes,
fMRI brain studies
yeah,
show that really as little as a month, you've got very distinct brain
yeah.
waves showing that calm and make your whole day go better.
I do wonder if you walk into your daily examine already with a psychological sense of belonging to God, not anxious, a sense that you're doing it in partnership with Him, that you derive, incremental benefits again from any spiritual practice that you have. And whether the more you do the daily examine, the more it brings you to an alignment to remember a perspective. This is God's world. This is His work. This is His ministry. He is in charge. Whether you get that sort of build-up of perspective that then adds to the value of going, this prayer is not just words, it's anchored on something deep. I don't know, maybe.
That's right. And I'm not doing this alone.
Yeah.
And that there's lots of positive mental health studies on like the arc of time and that, when you're just looking at right now, like, and your worries right now, what's coming ahead, that it is so helpful to us to be able to look back and remember when times have been better, when times were worse and got better again. And of you know,
Yes.
the
Yes.
United Methodists I work with believe that, the arc of social justice is long, but that it's bending toward justice.
Perspective, isn't it? Yeah. I read your bio and you said you have discovered 4 things that clergy can do. So, did we already talk about the 4 things?
No, okay. One of my things that we did is we took survey data, and from it we identified clergy who were flourishing based on that positive mental health definition I gave you. And we also screened out and made sure that they didn't have high depression or anxiety symptoms. So we just took flourishers. And then we took clergy with burnout. We have separate measures on burnout, which can be like feeling emotionally exhausted and almost like cynical toward the people you're working with, and like you're not accomplishing anything. So we took people with high burnout scores and also made sure that they weren't having high depression or anxiety symptoms. And we interviewed them. We interviewed 51, and we didn't ask them, why are you flourishing? Why are you burned out? We asked them, how do you approach ministry? Like, what are your challenges? What are your joys? How do you go about your day? And from really careful qualitative analysis, we were able to discern 4 behaviors that flourishing clergy were doing that clergy with burnout were not doing.
Okay.
So let me tell you what these 4 are, right? The
Yes.
first one was that, and this is all on our website. There's a fully alive resource. So if you search for Duke Clergy Health Initiative and click on the resources tab, you'll be able to find that. But the first one is that flourishing clergy actually preserve some time every day just for them.
Mm,
And it could be, when I say just for them, it could be family dinner, it could be alone time, but they actually have some time set aside for them. They figure that out. They also have an intentional well-being practice. And we didn't see that it mattered whether it was a spiritual well-being practice or mental well-being or physical well-being, but they had something. And I'd like to say from other studies that you might feel like all different kinds of ideas come at you all the time of like, oh, I should do this mental well-being practice and I should do this one. And yeah, it is like that because people are offering them all up. The thing is you just need one for the season you're in. Pick
mm.
what is speaking to you now and you can change it up. I would say make it an evidence-based one that has had research behind it, but like many different things can work, even for the same person. So flourishing clergy had an intentional well-being practice that they found time to do. Clergy with burnout did not do that. You remember what I said earlier about how flourishing clergy handled criticism by asking themselves, is it related to what God's wanting me to do? And letting that criticism go if it wasn't related. Well, that was one that came from this study. And then the fourth different behavior that flourishing clergy did is they um, shared with other people the good things that they saw happening in this world.
In the world, not
In the
necessarily
world.
just in this.
It could be with them, it could be in the world. It was
Wow.
not like a prideful thing. It was not like, "Oh, I won this award." But it could be like, "Oh my goodness, I've been, counseling this congregant for a while, and now I see God moving in their lives." Like, it could be that. It could also just be, the daffodils came up in my backyard. But there was this flourishing clergy only would reach out to
Yeah.
others and share something good. And we know that works, and it has been found in other studies without clergy. It works because you're extending the positive emotions. And unfortunately for us humans, the negative emotions last a long time. They can last until you've taken care of the problem. So, like back to my cancer diagnosis, I was worried about that until I got good health news. But when something positive happens, often there's nothing for you to do about it. You're like, I passed that test. Wonderful.
Um,
Maybe I savor that moment, but there's really almost no reason a week later for me to like remember that I passed that test. But you can extend those positive emotions by calling someone up and saying, "Hey, I was really worried about this test and I studied really hard for it. And oh my gosh, I did fine." And like they'll celebrate that with you and you'll remember it again. And it will make
Oh,
your day go better. And it
yeah.
builds on itself. It might not matter so much doing that one day. The thing is if you make it a practice and you do that multiple days in a row, it does start to make enough of a difference that your positive mental health can go up.
Oh my gosh, I love this. There's lots of light bulbs dinging from over making all kinds of connections because we know clergy are actually a lot of what did you your caring professionals are poor at help seeking behavior. We don't want to bother anybody. But this is a practice of reaching out, of actually, and it builds community as well. It builds familiarity and intimacy. I mean, people can know all the bad stuff that's happening for me, but if I'm sharing also the things that I found delightful or hopeful or things that have been a real win for me, that can actually give us feedback. I'm remembering actually, because I've always had a mentor in my life, not because I even knew what the definition was, but I think it's a God thing. You know, from as long as I can remember, people would write to me to encourage me. And so I
Right.
know the benefits of anticipating a connection time with my mentor when we can high five one another or, sort of have a real like fist bump moment together. And you're right, it does build because when you do that regularly, you're building on the knowledge of also what's meaningful for you as being positive and a win. So,
That and a lot of coaches, and I do think
yeah.
clergy benefit from coaching. A lot of coaches ask, "Well, what is going well?" And they have you hold that up. And also when something's not going well now, they will often have you remember a time when you'd been challenged and then you worked your way through it. And like,
Yes.
what did you do? So the things
Yeah.
that went well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
There's
all that broadening of that perspective, isn't it?
I mean, we have not tested this in clergy, but a psychologist, Sonia Lubomirsky, has studied this idea of ending your day on a high note.
Yes. Yes.
And the idea of I do this sometimes, especially actually if I've had a challenging day, I will try to turn it around by the last thing I do. And I know clergy don't necessarily clock out at 5 o'clock, but like if you think about when you're transitioning to something, to dinner, to your family, to exercise or something, if you're making a transition and to say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to end my day on a high note. So, like, I'll call up someone, like one of my colleagues, and I'll check in on my favorite project. I'll be like, "Did you make any progress? Did you learn something? Have you told anyone? How's that going?" Or I will call someone and I will share the good thing that I did learn today or that happened today. And so, in that way, even if your day's been hard, if your last moments of it felt
Yes.
good, it
Yes.
actually kind of paints the whole day a little
It
brighter.
opens up the window almost and lets more. Well, Chris Adams, whose episode is today, it dropped today. In his flourishing in ministry research, he's actually found that the daily well-being practice, which includes, he says, do 20 minutes at the end of the day to really attend to where things have gone great or well, and also where you feel like your ministry was most connected to your gifting, your strengths, and your conviction. So he actually says that that's one of the key connectors to flourishing in ministry.
Oh, that's great. Well, your listeners should definitely listen to him. I love Chris Adams. Chris Adams came to one of our initial Spirited Life interventions, and we've been able to work together all this time. And if he's saying that from his flourishing in ministry work and program, then that sounds like good advice.
Yeah. And with these 4 practices, it almost strikes me like, do you think like you kind of have a try a few things out for size? Like you were saying that, time for yourself. I know a lot of pastors who self-criticize themselves for watching Netflix or,
Oh, no, we all need some time.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah.
And we all need a little boundaries around the time. Like, I guess I had wondered if, you know, it can feel so beautiful to me sometimes when my whole life comes together, like what my family is doing has the spiritual meaning and purpose, and it's also pleasurable at the same time. Maybe we're doing a volunteer project while on vacation. Like sometimes I feel like it can all come together in a great way. But what we've learned with clergy is like you still need some of that personal time to yourself. Don't feel like you have to make every moment of everything weaving together. Those breaks are very important.
Yeah. And you can experiment too with what works for you. Just, something that works for someone else may not be like, those well-being practices, for example. Some people like running, some people don't. Some people shouldn't because, their
Yes.
knees and their body wouldn't be good for them. Those well-being practices, I find too that clergy that grow up in really duty-bound households, just as children, they didn't actually really know what it was to be playful or have fun or have anything that resembled a downtime. And so it may be difficult to figure out what that well-being practice might be for you.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I think experimenting is a great idea, and it can be different things in different seasons. They have done studies that have found that if you find the well-being practice to be pleasant, you're more likely to keep doing it. I mean, duh, right? You're more likely to keep doing it if you like it.
Yeah.
I would encourage everyone sometimes to try something you think you're not going to like and try it a few
Yeah.
times. Like in particular, if there are some things that are so powerful that they work on multiple levels. And so physical activity is one of them. You don't have to think about it as exercise, but anything that gets your heart rate up will help both your mental health and your physical health. And so it's well worth like trying it for 2 to 4 weeks before saying this is not for me, or it's well worth experimenting with different kinds of physical activity until you find one that you like. Even if it's like playing hide and go seek and running your
Right.
kids
Oh,
or your
that's
dog around the park, it does not have to mean that you have to go to the gym.
nice. Yeah, Reggie, one of the reasons why we really connected at the conference was because we've tried to operationalize one piece of your team's work, which is your profiles of well-being. You've got your flourishing, your languishing, your burdened but fulfilled, and your distressed. And we've tried to put together something to do it justice. So we've got our little tune-in quiz on the website that expands those categories a little bit because, one day I'll email you and say, could we get the scoring rubric from you? But because we hadn't met when I created that, I was just looking at means and that I could put together. I would love to hear straight from you, though. Those profiles were, I believe, because you were looking at shifts as well. Yeah. I'd love to know your practical takeaways from, you can be in these profiles and it can shift. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Oh my goodness. This is really great work on our team done by Jane Lee. And she knows how to do a fancy statistical technique
Yes.
called Lincoln class analysis. And so she took mental distress measures like depression, anxiety, burnout, along with the positive mental health measure that measures those three aspects that we talked about earlier, and looked to see clergy profiles where there were large enough groups of clergy where their answers to those distress and positive mental health measures were similar. And so we expected a distressed group, and that's where everything's going wrong. And we did find that. I think maybe like 18-ish% of the clergy. We also found a flourishing group where everything was going well, and that was like 40% of clergy. This was using data from 16 and 2014, 16, and 19. We took like a 5-year period and 3 survey waves to do this. So we had our great groups. You got your flourishers and your distress group. And what was really interesting is that there were also 2 groups in between. And so after the flourishers, there was this other group that we named burdened but fulfilled. And so this group, their depression, anxiety, and burnout scores were starting to creep up. They were lower than the cutoff scores of concerning levels, but they had high positive mental health. And so I'm like, oh, that's an interesting group. I wonder how many of your listeners feel burdened but fulfilled. And that was like 20-ish%. And then we had another group that we called languishing, by which we meant they just really didn't have much positive going on.
Yeah.
The negative aspects were there creeping up, but Again, not at concerning levels. And then we looked at, does this shift? Like, what happened between this 5-year period ending in 2019? And then we got more survey data on the same individuals, so we could see how the same person did over time in 2021.
Mm.
And so for the clergy we were working with, there was the COVID shutdown here in the US. The United Methodists were also splitting around really important issues around gay love, whether or not you could ordain a pastor in a same-sex relationship and whether or not those clergy could marry a same-sex couple. So there was a lot of hard conversations going on within congregations. And, in the United States, we've had a very long and fraught and damaging history around race,
Mm.
and it was heightened during this period.
Right.
And so we wondered what was going to go on. And the good news is that the clergy who were flourishing were really likely to still be flourishing in 2021. You might think nothing would allow you to still be flourishing in the face of all of that.
Mm.
So that was just incredible. The distressed clergy stayed distressed. And so then our question is like, okay, what about these middle groups? What about the burdened but fulfilled? And what about the languishing groups? What would happen to them? And I've got to say, in my heart, I was really rooting for those burdened but fulfilled
Yeah.
groups.
Yes.
24 of them, 24% of them became distressed. So they moved a couple levels down, and that's a lot. And languishing, 24%, just coincidentally the same percentage, also became
Awesome.
distressed. And so our takeaway message is that if you're like a denominational official, like you want your clergy to be flourishing. You really don't want to stop at burdened but fulfilled. And also it means if you're a minister listening to this podcast, please do take a little bit of that personal time and share your good news and adopt one of these practices like mindfulness or the daily examine or the other ones that we have on our website because you really do need to be at your best because we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a well-being quiz running only for 6 months last year. So as a clinical psychologist, I'm very well practiced in ill health disease. But, in the course of doing my PhD, I was convicted by the well-being that has got, a positive mental health. And so when I chanced upon your work as a result of doing my literature review, this year we changed it to include the positive mental health. So we're getting those and the profiles because I think you're right. I often say when I'm talking to clergy, there's about 50% of you that are okay, and you don't even know that the person next to you is probably not okay. And there's going to be about probably 20%, which is what our stats show us, that are in the distress, and they probably need clinical help. But this middle group, they're the ones that people don't see and forget, but this is where we can really make a difference to encourage. So when I saw your paper, I was like, we have to put this into our emotional health screen because it'll give a heads up to individuals. Because we know, caring professionals, we're not great at identifying how we're going. And we're not going to ask people either. We just sit there. And so it would give the individual a heads up to say, oh, I really need to pay attention to what's going on inside of me. But it would also get because we've now enabled the report, so you can opt to send it to someone. And sometimes people opt to send it to their coach, their mentor, their spouse. It enables then a conversation of saying, "Oh, look, let's really pay attention and let's ensure that we're putting some nourishing things in." So that, because, when I saw that 24% in both of those middle categories were going to landslide down, I was like, no, 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 let's do something about this, right?
Oh, I just love it that you're taking action and trying to make it better. And you're right. The first step is to be aware of where you are and to have hope that you can change.
Yes.
Like we've seen people in every category change. People from
Yes.
distressed also
Yeah.
move all the way to flourishing. Like,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
possible. And some of it takes really hard personal work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the environment you're in, which
Yeah.
can be the church that you're in.
Yeah.
And how we perceive and react to stress, like, we do have some control over that, although there's nothing as good as a good environment. The other thing
Yes.
is, like, if you're a denominational official, you still need to put resources towards clergy who are distressed.
Yes. Absolutely.
But I wonder if it might take fewer resources and be very impactful to put them toward clergy who are languishing or burdened but fulfilled and get
Absolutely.
them to move up.
I'd love to encourage you with this new work that we just did. We experimented. We actually did it for a team, not in Australia, in Asia. So
Okay.
the whole team took our quiz,
That is
built a
great.
forward.
I'm sure you could.
We were able to input into a team well-being intervention so that those who were going okay could share about what was helping for them and create ministry team activities to share and collaborate and encourage and to bring that in. So that's one of our newest inventions. Hopefully you think it's okay.
Oh, I do. Oh, I very much do. People should take that if they have a way to get feedback from you to kind of know where their profile lands. That would be brilliant. And then the question is, what do you do with that? And so there are resources and practices that you can do.
Excellent. I would love to know what you've discovered about marriages.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we are diving into this now. So these things are like hot off the presses, and forgive me if I narrate anything wrong. First of all, I think this is a real understudied area. So I
Mm.
encourage other researchers who might be listening to go into this and find out more and tell me about it because we like to learn more. We are finding that if you are okay, one thing we've looked at is your sources of support. So we all know that social support is great. Like we all need social support. Where do clergy get it? And so there's a large percentage of clergy who only get that support from their spouse.
Yes.
And there's all kinds of reasons about ministering churches and how you might move around and who is it safe to talk to about things. And a lot of times it falls to your spouse. And at first we thought our finding was that the more sources of support you had as a pastor, the better your satisfaction in ministry would be. So that was super intuitive. We're like, oh, okay, so if you get support from your spouse, but also from friends and from family and from congregants who do turn out to have a really important role, then you're going to be doing better. And then we had an astute journal reviewer who said, is that true for men and women? And we went back and we looked, and it was only true for men. So if you're a male pastor, minister, more sources of support you have, the better.
Okay.
But if you're a clergy woman, it needs to be your spouse. What mattered far most was that your spouse was providing you support in your ministry work. And if you didn't have that, then it was going to be very hard to be satisfied with ministry.
Okay, so if you're male, multiple sources of support works for you, not necessarily just spousal support. But if you were a female, the key is the support of your spouse.
That's right.
So interesting.
That's right. Now, I would still recommend that everybody go get as much
We all
support as
need
they can, and I still think that there's really something to your congregants, but yes. And so I think that has some implications for us around what do we do for marriage support, and making sure that there's no stigma amongst clergy to have couples counseling, being able to say in advance this is going to be hard living in the fishbowl and maybe being criticized, and how's your spouse going to feel about you being criticized, and what's it going to be like maybe before you had somebody else who was attending to you and your spirit, and now it's your spouse who's the pastor, and maybe you feel like you've lost your pastor. Like there's a lot of complicated things going on, and so being able to make it really normal that this is going to be challenging, and you need to put time into it and foster your relationship, even though you're so busy, right? Adding one more thing to the list, but it will pay off in spades.
And I know this is hot off the press because I didn't even realize that this research had been done. Because when I looked at your profile, I jumped at it. And so, is this quantitative? Is this qualitative?
That's quantitative. So we had 2 journal articles that just serendipitously were accepted and went online in February, so just a month ago. And they're both on our website, and they're open access, so it's free to anyone who can find it. If you get to our website and you click on research and then journal articles, you will see them. There's one more, which is we wondered as a team, would like how much of the environment that
Yeah.
clergy are serving in would that affect their relationship? And
Oh,
so we hypothesized that if you had negative things going on in your church, that might take a negative toll on your relationship. And it does. Like we were able to pick that up.
yeah.
It's cross sectional, so I should not say that we definitely know it's causal, but it's a pretty large effect size, and it's possible that it really is coming from the environment you serve in. So that wasn't shocking.
As in, it impacts the marital quality, the marital relationship.
Yeah, so clergy who said, let me get this right. We looked at two difficult things going on.
Mm-hmm.
So hostility in the church environment. These are things like congregants making decisions that affect you and your family without asking you, or congregants questioning your faith. Like these are that's deeply personal, and these kind of hostile things, if those were going on, then the
Yeah,
clergy person was going to have a worse satisfaction with their marriage relationship.
yeah.
Also, what we just call clergy occupational distress, which is just feeling like there's too many demands on your time and there's lots of stressors from the church, like
The
that also.
interference. Yeah,
So it didn't have to be as toxic as
yeah.
the hostility, but so both of those and separately, those clergy rated their marriages as less strong. What we didn't know is what about if there were positive things going on in the environment? So you remember earlier I said that our human brain is hardwired for negative things, and we spend a lot of energy on negative things, and that's because we are always looking for the bear or the lion or the thing that's going to get us. And of course now it's an email, and so we get ramped up all the time. But like, so we really thought negative things would be related to worse clergy relationships. But we actually found that positive things going on in the congregation was strongly related to better clergy marriages. And so we looked at a couple uh, aspects of positive things, and they were like how satisfied you were with ministry and how loved and cared for you felt by your congregants. And so if you are laity out there, love on your pastor. Let them know that you're listening to their sermons, that it's making a difference in your life, that you care about them as a person and not just as your pastor. Ask them about what they're doing for their next vacation and what are they reading for fun. Encourage them to take care of their health. You do those things, and it might improve their marriage.
Anything else? I'm like just soaking it in.
I mean, I think there's one surprise that we've had lately, and it is this idea of feeling loved and cared for by
Yeah.
your congregants. Like in North America, a lot of churches, especially the mainline Protestant churches, are shrinking. They're having fewer members, and with that comes a lot of financial difficulty. And so we've been looking for what can help clergy emotionally, even in the face of those very powerful difficulties. And it just looks like in the data, feeling loved and cared for by congregants
1,000%.
is it appears to be making a difference. Again, it's cross-sectional, not causal, but it appears to be making a difference in clergy, even in the face of shrinking and less money. And we have on our website like a very brief 4 or 5 page loved and cared for document that laity can have some ideas as to how to care for their minister.
We'll link that. Now this is again pinging some things for me because in my Masters of Leadership project 2023, one of the top reasons for clergy thinking about leaving the ministry was the impact on families. It was loneliness and impact on family. And in my sample, that was actually higher than the workload. So I think, it speaks to that sense of belonging. And then in 2024, we did a ministry kids wellbeing survey. So we actually asked the children. And I think it's interesting that for children, they have a resource in their parents, the individual parents, but also in the relationship of the parents, and then all the sibling relationships. So that network of care and love and attention and focus serves as a a huge engine for children to feel well. And so when that's impacted, if there are things coming in from ministry or the outside into their parents' marriage, that also impacts what the kids get as well. And so when we discovered that pastors were actually saying, I'd leave the ministry because of the impact on the family, we knew that there were some scattered pieces of work on the clergy spouse experience, even though it's not a lot, but they're scattered. But we couldn't find actually anything on how the kids were feeling. And again, cross-sectional correlational, but this is what we actually found is that feeling understood by their parents was correlated to feeling positive about being in ministry, as well as not being as bothered about being different. So we were having kids, because we got their comments, qualitative as well as quantitative. We were getting children that were telling us, I turn up to school and people tease me that my father's a pedo because of what's happening in the media, right? So, but
Oh my
feeling
goodness.
understood with parents was actually a protective factor or a correlational protective factor to not being bothered about being singled out as being different. And having enough time with parents was related to feeling less of an impact on what was happening on their parents' ministry on them. Because we know, children know, like people forget that they're at the morning tea table. They can hear what you're saying. And my kids would tell me we would just scan and watch people's body language when dad preaches. Like whether they were right or wrong about the interpretation, but they were watching the body language. And here's another thing. So girls were more likely to be impacted about the feeling different from their peers. And girls and older children were more likely to feel the impact of their parents' ministry on them.
And the older children too.
The children.
Valerie, this is such important work. No one is doing this work, despite the fact that we've known for 70 years that being in ministry affects the family. There really are not evidence-based interventions for it, and we need there isn't nearly enough data that's coming from the kids. I mean, that's really unique, or from the spouses. Find it from the partners or spouses, and so pulling all that together as you just did, that's a gold mine. That has a lot of intervention implications there. And
Thank you. I think it speaks to the ecosystem of care. Where else these days in society can you turn up every week, rock up every week where people will love on you? Very few places. And so here we have churches that can be that ecosystem, that reset for everybody, including the pastor, if they're married, their spouse, and if they have children, their children. It's actually such a protective mechanism if the ecosystem is providing all of that care. So I guess I just was reflecting on that. You're finding it in the marriages. I reckon if we really drilled down, we would actually find that it spills into children. And of course, if we're thinking who's going to be the future ministry work, these kids are experiencing and making meaning and making sense of it too.
that's right. 13% of our sample are pastors' children who are now the pastors.
Wow. I've got goosebumps. Rae Jean, thank you so much
Oh,
for your work. I mean, when I had my academic rock star moment at the conference when I saw you there, it's because of your work that got me thinking operationally, really, how we can help our ministry folk here in Australia. But I just want to thank you for your faithfulness, for your tuning in on a group of people that other people don't tune into. It's so hard for us to find, not even just quality research, but just research. And the fact that you've got this long history, this segment so well, it has really thoroughly brought me so much encouragement and has benefited our work here. So I'm so thankful for you, for your work, for your team, and also for your time today.
oh my gosh, I love hearing that. That's why we do it, and you are doing it too. I mean that, and thank you for. I can't believe you have a whole podcast devoted to clergy well-being. Like this is really, and what you do is so research-based, and that's just fantastic because we only have so much time in the day. If you're going to adopt a new practice, make it one that the data
Yeah.
has shown works for a lot of people, and then you can decide if it works for you or not. But
Absolutely.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for this.